Welcome to the 18th century court. My name is Helen and I'm from Oxford, and this is my colleague Adam, who is from the University of Newcastle, from the United Kingdom. Now I'm saying a special welcome to the ladies, because this session we've called it Motherhood and Mistresses. So, all the ladies here have to imagine that they are a princess. They have been chosen by a prince to be his consort. Now, before you've come to court, there have been all these negotiations. There have been long accounts as to whether you are getting your period regularly. In other words, are you going to be able to have children? You may have been examined by a doctor, and that report will have gone to the court of your prospective husband. Because why has the king chosen you? You know that you are beautiful and charming and intelligent. He has chosen you for one reason, and one reason only. You have to bear not just children, but a son. You do not have a choice about this. There's none of this, darling, I have a headache business. It is your business to have sex with the monarch or the duke or the count or whatever, and this is your religious duty as well as your dynastic duty. So, I, for example, have been looking at one particular princess who left her home in Dresden in Germany at the age of 13, travelled over the Alps down through Italy to Naples to meet her new husband. Fortunately, he was not 65, he was only 22, they liked each other, and they consummated the marriage immediately. How do we know? Because he writes a detailed account of everything he did on the wedding night to his mother back in Spain. Chère maman, cher papa, I did this and this and this, and then she did this and this and this, and then we did it all over again. So, he has now got a little, you know, it's like a child, you get a little smiley face in your exercise book. Son, you did the right thing. You got on with it straight away. Did she become pregnant straight away? No, she did not. So then she had about a year and a half with everybody watching her. Every ambassador at court is watching her. Is she having her period or is she not? They are talking to her maid. Her maid is looking at her bedclothes and her underwear. They are all talking about it. All the letters are going to and fro. Is she pregnant yet? She finally gets pregnant, and when she's 15, she has her first child. Oh, everybody is waiting, and so on. All the celebrations are set up. What does she have? She has a girl. So all the reports then say, even though it was only a girl, the king was very pleased, and there were magnificent festivities. She gets pregnant again and she has another girl. She gets pregnant again and she has another girl. The first child dies. The second child dies. She gets pregnant again and she has another girl. Have you been counting? We're now on the fourth girl. She gets pregnant again and she has her fifth girl. And then she gets pregnant again and her sixth child is now a boy. And she is still only, you know, she's only barely in her early 20s, and she has buried 2 children. Now, it later turned out that that son was mentally impaired, so he couldn't actually be the king. But by that time, she has had another 5 boys and 2 girls. She is dead at the age of 35. She's Queen of Naples for 20 years, loves Naples, but she has to go to Spain because her husband becomes King of Spain. Hates Spain, hates it, hates everything about, hates her mother-in-law, as Jill was explaining, you know, hates the mother-in-law who's there all along. And so she's dead. She has fulfilled her duty. She's the mother of the next King of Spain and the next King of Naples. Now, I won't go on too long because my colleague has to get on to what happens on this chaise longue here. But I've read some of her letters where she writes to her sister-in-law who's pregnant again, and she says, "Oh, you poor thing, it's so wonderful if you can have a break between pregnancies. I know what it's like always to be pregnant." She writes to her brother and she says, "It's a short letter today because I'm sitting here with a basin under my chin. I'm vomiting all the time. She was always sick. 13 pregnancies, she was always sick." She said, "I faint." You know, all these things. She says to her sister-in-law, "I only ever congratulate a woman up to the 6th pregnancy. After that, it's a disaster." So, one final thing. What happens if you don't get pregnant? This is far worse than being constantly pregnant. Svante, in his talk, mentioned Marie Antoinette. Well, she's 14, she arrives in France with a man who isn't interested in sex and isn't interested in her. And she's married for 7 years and they have not consummated the marriage. Why? Because he does not know what you do with a woman when you get her into bed. He literally does not know what to do. And her brother, the Emperor Joseph II, comes from Vienna, incognito, which means he doesn't come as the emperor, he comes as an aristocrat. And he literally takes her husband, who by now is King of France, aside and says, "You have to do this. You have to get her there. You have to get that in there and keep it in there. Because if you don't, she isn't going to become pregnant. She doesn't become, the marriage isn't consummated for 7 years. So it takes her ages to have a baby. The first little boy dies when he's, let me tell you exactly what age he was. He dies when he's only 7, of TB. She manages to get pregnant 4 times, but doesn't actually have a living son. The only child of hers who survives is a daughter. So to be always pregnant was awful. Not to be able to get pregnant was worse. But the final thing is women did not have a choice and they did not control their own fertility. Their body belonged to the monarch. Now, what was he doing while they had their head in a basin, saying, and fainting and so on and so forth? So over to Adam. Do you want to hop?
I'm
yeah.
fine. I'll get you down.
No, but you can hop up there.
I think I'm tall enough.
You're practically exactly the same age.
Yes. So the short answer to your question is that he was doing everybody else when the woman was being sick. He is not duty bound to be faithful in noble culture, and this is a, if you like, a tension with religious diktats. So I think the key thing to mention here is that whilst for us sex is a private matter, I've only been in Sweden 2 days, but I get that impression that's the sense. In the 17th century, in the 16th century, for sex with the king is a public matter. Everybody knows, as Helen said, when, where, and how it's going. And at court, if things are not going well, if the king has too many mistresses, this is frequently commented on. And this is humiliating, obviously, for the Queen. So the Queen that I look at is Catherine of Braganza, who is the Portuguese bride of Charles II. She arrives in England in 1662 in a moment of real triumph, because Portugal is not recognised as a kingdom at this time. It is just ceded from Spain, who are making sure that everybody sees it as a rebellious nation. So for the King of England to marry her, it's this great moment of triumph. She has done a great service to her kingdom. But that moment of elation is scuppered, is ruined when she realises that she has married a man who is very short but has many mistresses. And one of whom is particularly important, Barbara Palmer, who was his mistress for 10 years. And she is the great rival to the Queen. And there are reports, essentially everybody at the court, everybody in the palace knows that Charles they've seen him going between rooms between his mistresses, and they're gossiping about it. They're writing satires and pinning them around the court, mocking the king, mocking the queen, saying that she can't make him happy. So this woman lives in a position of power, which is also a position of extreme humiliation. But the interesting thing, as well, alongside that humiliation, because Charles is so licentious, because he behaves so badly, the populace, especially in London, blame him for the ills of the nation. They say if only Charles spent more time in matters of government rather than in lots of different women's beds, the nation would be healthier. And there are a series of events in the mid-1660s which are seen as divine punishment for Charles's actions. So that the main one being that half of London burns down in 1666, and the second one being that the English are repeatedly humiliated by the Dutch at war. A lot of the political commentary of the time not only mocks Charles for being a playboy, but uses Catherine, his wife, as an example of piety. So we have a Protestant nation celebrating a Catholic queen and saying if only the king was more like this woman, the whole health of the nation would be better. So you have a very kind of domestic, what we would see as a domestic and private issue at the heart of public politics. So essentially doing sex badly is an issue of national importance at this time.
And she never has children.
No, that is seen as a failure. We wouldn't necessarily put it in that language, but they have no qualms with that. We are the most popular. Who would have thought that sex would be the most popular?
Oh, we never have thought that.
No.